Saturday afternoon, 1975. You push open the bathroom door and they're wearing a big crochet dress, sitting on the back of the toilet. Underneath her skirt is a spare roll of Andrex. Your nan had one, half the street had one, and nobody ever questioned why. It's one of 25 items in this film that made no sense but were in all of our homes. You might have forgotten half of them, but the second I mention them, they come straight back. Breville brought out its toasted sandwich maker in 1974, and it took over British kitchens almost overnight. You'd butter 2 slices, put some cheese in the middle, close the lid, and 4 minutes later the filling was hot enough to take the roof of your mouth off. You'd bite in and spend the next 10 seconds breathing through it while everyone else carried on eating. The nonstick stopped working after about 3 goes. After that you were scraping melted cheese off with a butter knife. People tried all sorts in there: beans, if they were feeling brave; chocolate spread, if nobody was watching. A 2005 survey found nearly half of British adults still had one tucked away in a cupboard, unused. It came out once a year for old time's sake, then went straight back where it came from. The beaded door curtain was another kitchen favorite. Strings of wooden or plastic beads hung from the frame, beads brushing the floor. The idea came from places like Spain and Italy, where they kept flies out in the summer heat. In a terraced house in the middle of England in November, they didn't keep anything out. They just made noise, a big racket every time someone walked through. You couldn't sneak anywhere. Kids loved them and would walk through again and again, just for the sound. Within a few weeks half the strings had tangled together and stayed that way, until there were just a few beads hanging off one side that nobody ever took down. If your house was it had a serving hatch, a sliding panel. You could pass plates through without walking all the way round. It sounded clever, but it didn't really work. You could only fit one plate through at a time, so everyone still had to get up and queue. All the steam and cooking smells came straight through the gap, and whoever was in the kitchen could hear everything being said at the table, so the conversation ended up being shouted back through the hole. The kids used it to pass notes and toys and, on at least one occasion, the cat. Some of these features were only mildly daft, but the twin-tub washing machine was proper hard work. 2 tubs sat side by side, one for washing, one for spinning. You filled the wash tub yourself, added the powder, waited for the cycle to finish, then lifted each soaking item out with a pair of wooden tongs and moved it across into the spinner. The whole machine shook during the spin cycle. It really shook, enough to send it skidding across the kitchen floor if you weren't holding on. You had to keep one eye on the drain hose the whole time in case it came loose and flooded the lino. Millions of homes ran one of these every Monday because that was wash day. The fondue set was a wedding present favorite in the 1970s. A ceramic pot with a little spirit burner underneath and a set of long forks, promising alpine conviviality at the dining table. The reality was less elegant. The burner was a nightmare to get going. The cheese either stayed hard or turned to rubber, and every single time someone's bread slipped off the fork and sank, nobody ever knew what you were supposed to do next. Most fondue sets came out once, made a mess, and went straight back in the box. Every charity shop in the country still has a stack of them. Now, opinions about them. The avocado, all matching in a very specific shade of green that most people in Britain had never seen on an actual avocado, was the thing to have in the early 70s. You'd put brown carpet on the floor, hang some gold-colored towels, and think you'd really done something. By the 90s, estate agents were telling people to rip them out before viewings. Funny thing, original sweets are now going for good money at salvage yards. People want them back. And yes, British homes put carpet in the bathroom. Thick, wall-to-wall carpet, all around the toilet and right up to the bath. Houses were cold, no central heating in a lot of homes, so the carpet kept your feet warmer. The problem was obvious to everyone except the people fitting it. Around the base of the toilet it stayed permanently damp. You couldn't see what was growing underneath, but after a while you could smell it. Tiles were available the whole time, but no, we went with carpet. Then there was the bedside kettle, the goblin teasmade, an alarm clock with a kettle that sat on the bedside table. When the alarm went off it boiled the water, filled the pot, and your tea was supposed to be ready before you'd opened your eyes. What actually happened was it hissed and gurgled and spat steam across the bed while you tried to sleep through it. The tea sat in the pot too long and went bitter. The ceiling above got damp by the 1990s. In the 1980s it had become one of those prizes on Bullseye that nobody really wanted to win, but at the time they were in bedrooms all over the country. Back to floors and furniture. Deep, thick shagpile carpet in colors like burnt orange, dark brown, olive green and rusty red filled living rooms through the late 60s and 70s. And anything you dropped disappeared. Coin up. The vacuum barely made a dent unless you had something powerful, and even then the pile folded and hid whatever was underneath. When people finally pulled it up in the 80s, they found years' worth of lost things buried in there. If the carpet was holding on to everything, the furniture was doing the opposite. The three-piece suite in the 1970s was almost always covered in draylen, that velvet-like fabric in brown, burnt orange or mustard. It looked smart when it was new, but it had a hidden talent: static. You'd get up off the sofa and your hair would stand on end. Touch a door handle and you'd get a shock. If you had a cat, the fur stuck to it like it was magnetic. Then there were the arm covers, little rectangles of fabric draped over each armrest to stop them wearing out. They were never quite big enough and spent their lives sliding off. Every time someone sat down, especially a child, they ended up on the floor, someone picked them up and put them back, and the whole thing started again. Storage heaters were big, heavy boxes bolted to the wall. They charged up overnight on cheap electricity and were supposed to release that heat slowly through the day. By breakfast, the room could be boiling. By late afternoon, when it was actually getting cold, they'd given up completely. Once they were on the wall, they weren't going anywhere. The Coleffect electric fire tried to look like a real fireplace. Fake logs, painted clay and a motor spinning a piece of foil behind a bulb to imitate glowing coals. From across the room in low light you could almost convince yourself. Get any closer and you saw the foil going round and heard the motor. If the motor stuck, you were left staring at an orange bulb in a plastic box with no warmth coming off it. Some models about as useful as a picture or property. You know the wood chip wallpaper. Small pieces of wood pressed into thick paper, stuck to every wall. It was cheap and it covered a lot: cracks, damp patches, old paper. It did its job for years. The problem came the day you tried to take it off. You'd steam it, soak it, scrape it, and still end up pulling off tiny pieces while the rest stayed exactly where it was. Then you'd find another layer underneath. The lava lamp was a glass tube with colored wax suspended in liquid, heated from below. The wax warmed, rose in slow blobs, cooled and sank again. It did nothing useful, but you could sit and watch it for ages. The only rule was, don't shake it, because someone always did. Shake it and the wax broke into 100 little bits that never properly came back together. The telephone table was a small piece of hallway furniture, half seat, half shelf, positioned next to the phone bolted to the wall on a cord that barely stretched a foot. The shelf held the phone book, the yellow pages and the local directory. When the phone rang, you sat yourself down in the coldest, draftiest part of the house and tried to have a conversation while everyone walked past you. When cordless phones arrived, the table lost its purpose overnight. Most of these pieces ended up in the garage holding tins of paint. If the telephone table was about making do, the hostess trolley was about showing off, a heated trolley on wheels designed for dinner parties. You'd load the food in earlier so that, when your guest sat down, you could wheel it in. The vegetables went grey, the gravy developed a skin on top, the roast potatoes lost any crispness they ever had, and the trolley itself usually had a wobble that made the whole trip feel like a risk. Between the mid-1960s, that textured coating, swirled into patterns with a comb, brush, or sponge, was cheap, quick and excellent at hiding rough plaster. It went on millions of ceilings. But Artex applied before about 1984 sometimes contained a small amount of white asbestos, and anyone who has tried to renovate one of those ceilings since found that out the hard way. Every door in the house had a draft excluder, a long stuffed tube of fabric laid along the bottom to keep the cold out. Some were plain, some knitted, and inexplicably a huge number were shaped like dachshunds or snakes. Your nan probably made hers out of old tights stuffed with newspaper. They never stayed in place. Every time you opened the door, the excluder slid across the floor and bunched up against the wall. They helped a bit with the draft, but the time spent shoving them back into position probably cancelled out any warmth they saved. Christmas Day, and Dad is in the dining room trying to carve the turkey with the electric carving knife. It had 2 vibrating blades inside a plastic handle that made a loud buzzing the second you switched it on. You couldn't hear a word anyone was saying. It flicked bits of fat and juice across the tablecloth, leaving the bird looking more torn than carved. Cleaning, it meant taking the blades apart and picking out bits of meat with a skewer. It was used once a year and then forgotten about until the next Christmas. And every living room had a magazine rack, usually wire or wicker, tucked beside the armchair. Every single one started tidy and, in short order, ended up the same way. Radio Times, Woman's Own, a couple of Sunday supplements, a Littlewoods catalogue and a local paper from months ago. The rack leaned sideways under the together.